We're live on the NBC Sports YouTube page. I'm James Schiano, joined this week by George Bissell.
Bissell, yep, you're close. It's Frank.
Bissell, almost got it. Really almost got it there. But this first time, you guys might miss Eric Smolsky. He is out this week. George is here filling in. He's another one of our staff writers, the purveyor of the dynasty rankings that we have in the NBC Sports Rotoworld site. So we'll have positive questions on that. Also, just maybe the craziest 24 hours we've had of baseball news so far this season with the Rafael Devers trade from the Red Sox to the Giants, Shohei Ohtani's return to the mound, Jackson Merrill on the injured list, Brady House getting called up as an afterthought despite being a clear top 100 prospect in the league. Lots of really fun things for us to talk about in this next hour, George.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy Father's Day. I hope everybody had a great weekend. You got some real stunning news to kind of cap it off. You have Shohei Ohtani returning to the mound tonight to start Monday night against the Padres. So a lot going on. This is the perfect show. We're a wide open book. We'll get to whatever you want to talk about, whatever questions you may have. And like James touched on, I do a lot of the prospect and dynasty related content. So if you have a dynasty related question, this is the perfect show to address that and hopefully help you carve out your rosters looking towards the second half of the year.
Yeah, let's honestly start there for a second, just talking. What's your take on the Brady House being called up? What are expectations and what's kind of fair for us as fantasy players to think about Brady House at the moment?
So the interesting thing I think with House is that the Nationals have kind of had this hole at third base for a couple of years now. They've been trying to fill it. It hasn't really worked out. So House is a guy who's had a lot of experience in AAA. Has had a really nice year so far. I kind of view him as a decent power source. I think the batting average, he strikes out a lot. He's going to be close to 25%. So anytime you're striking out a quarter of the time, almost in AAA, you're looking at that batting average coming down when you adjust to facing major league pitching for the first time. So I kind of view him as a cheap power source. I think for me, from a dynasty standpoint, I have him right in that top 70 range among prospects. So I had him 68 in the update that I'm doing right now. So I think he's a clear pickup in deeper mixed leagues, but I wouldn't go expecting much beyond the occasional home run. I don't think he's going to be anything like a Roman Anthony type of impact where he's, helping out across all five categories. I think it's a power only type of profile at the outset of his career.
Yeah, it does seem like that. Also, one of the youngest players in Major League Baseball right now, just 22 years old, had gotten to Double-A by the time he was 20 with the Nationals after being I don't remember if it was a top 5 pick or a top 10 pick in 2021, but an incredibly high draft pick. And like you said, that Nationals team is, one, they've had a hole at third base, which seems like forever, and two, just completely kind of falling apart at the moment. David Martinez calling out his players and his front office at the same time in a press conference over the weekend.
Well, sometimes you got to shake things up. And I think House is the type of guy who I was never that high on him as a prospect because I kind of look for guys who can impact across all five categories, looking for a diverse array of skills. He's kind of been a power only guy. The batting average has been up this year in AAA, but I think like fantasy managers have seen over the last few months, the gap between AAA and the majors, I think, is as wide as it's ever been. There's very few guys who come up and make an immediate impact and turn into immediate five category impact stars from a fantasy standpoint. So I think that's the thing to watch. There's going to be an adjustment period for House like there is with any type of prospect, but I think the power is going to be there. He just doesn't steal bases. I think the batting average might dip a little bit more than you're expecting. So deep league only type of guy for me from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, and whenever these guys get called up, Fangraphs is nice to put the swing strike rates from AAA on their site. Him having or I think for every minor league level actually, the 15% swing strike rate, that's something that you don't really love to see from someone about to make this transition. Which, as George said, right now we have probably the biggest gap we've had in a long time in Major League Baseball, difference between AAA and the major leagues. But going to get to our first question here from Dad, regular supporter of the live stream. Love to see you again, Dad. Happy Father's Day to you, of course. Saying Bryson Stott has been batting 136, only compiling 6 hits and 0 steals in the month of June. Do we foresee him getting out of this slump or see a drop in 12-team leads? Second base is a wasteland. So you're going to get better than that. But in terms of a projection for the rest of the season, I don't know if you can drop him yet in the 12.
No, the position's bad, but I think what kind of stinks is that he's been dropped to the bottom of the order. That happened about 2 weeks ago now. They've started to sit him a little bit against lefties, try to get Edmundo Sosa in there. So just looking at, we do the lineups every day as we update the player news at Rotoworld. And, it's just interesting to see he's been out of the lineup a couple times against tougher lefties. So they're clearly trying to get him going again. giving a little bit of a mental reset. It just hasn't happened. And if they're comfortable moving Trey Turner to the top of the order, kind of letting Schwarber bat second, they're going to get Bryce Harper back here. Alec Boehm's kind of turned things around. I think maybe hits towards the bottom of the order, and that has an adverse impact from a counting stats standpoint. So I'd be kind of out on Stott, but there aren't a ton of great options out there if you're just looking at second base overall.
No, there really aren't. And it also makes sense from the Phillies' perspective to move Stott down the order. Like the names you just mentioned there, between guys should be at the top: Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper. They're all so much drastically better hitters than Bryson Stott. It's kind of not even funny. The Phillies kind of trying to shoehorn Stott at the top of that order seemed like something they were doing to try and just get him going. But at the end of the day, trying to get Bryson Stott going is like kind of just like, I don't know, it's like trying to start like the 87 Pontiac. It's like, why are we trying to make this happen so badly? Like, what's the goal here? The upside's a 710 OPS and a bunch of stolen bases, which again, in a 12-team mixed league, like that does play. That's still probably weirdly a top 12 second baseman. But we've seen someone like Stott, we've seen a guy like Bryce Terang, Andres Jimenez. These are, especially with Stott and I guess Jimenez too, because that first week of the season. But all three of those guys came out of the gate hot, being able to hit, and have reverted back to exactly the players we kind of thought they were. Now that we have a very like 40%, 45% chunk of the season over, it's just hard to be able to be a consistent performer in fantasy baseball when you can't literally hit.
Yeah, I think I'd be willing to move on in terms of a guy with greater upside, because even if Stott works out in a best case scenario, like you said, there's a limited ceiling there. So I'd probably be willing to roll the dice on somebody with a little more risk that maybe offers a little bit higher of a ceiling rest of the season.
Yeah, for sure. So give you would you rather right now. I don't even know if this guy's offering a higher ceiling in terms of roster spot. It might be more interesting because he's hot recently. Willie Castro or Bryson Stott?
I mean, that's tough. I think I'd still lean Stott, but Castro is interesting because you can play him at multiple positions. So in a deeper league, maybe Castro makes more sense.
The fact that you have to think about it, though, that kind of says a lot about where Bryson Stott is right now, though. The fact that you're considering Willie Castro over Bryson Stott, that's kind of meaningful in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the steals just, he's got 11 steals, but there's just no power. The batting average is torpedo. And if he's not going to score runs, like, what are you getting? Like, I'd rather take the chance on Castro than I think.
Here's a good one, follow up from Dad. Jeff McNeil versus Stott. I've written up Jeff McNeil in a few places over the last week. I included him in a YouTube video last week. I think that Jeff McNeil is someone he's kind of showing that at least as a hitter, as a ceiling there. You're not getting stolen base, of course, with Jeff McNeil, but you are getting some of that multi-positional eligibility because he's outfield eligible as well. Playing center field a few days a week for the Mets, which is incomprehensible as a guy in his mid-30s who's been a career infielder. But McNeil's hitting the ball right now. The OPS is over 900. He's already approaching his career high in home runs. If we take out his weird 23 home run 2019 season, already with 7 in like about 40 games this season. He moved up to 5th in the Mets order, really in the heart, driving in a lot of runs. He has at least the opportunity to do so. If I'm not completely starved for stolen bases, I'm definitely taking McNeil over Stott at this point.
I mean, you're the guy to ask about the Mets. I think what gets interesting from a roster standpoint is Mark Vientos is starting a rehab assignment this week, so you figure he's going to be back in a couple of days, probably by the end of the week. Things get interesting there because it's probably Ronnie Mauricio who's the odd man out, right? He probably heads back to the minors. There's just aren't enough at-bats to go around. They probably want him playing every day. So I think the playing time is going to be a little bit of a crunch there when you look at their roster going forward. So.
I think it will, but I don't think that's going. I think Jeff is above that. I think the mix is all of those young guys you just mentioned, with Jeff being someone who they're steady and committed to in the middle. But that was also the kiss of death for Brett Bailey. Once he got up to that 5th spot every single day, he stopped hitting. So we'll see what happens over the next month. But at the moment, I kind of like McNeil over Stott. We got another question here from Belligerent on the Twitch. Brian Reynolds is 1 for his last 22. I keep hearing he's unlucky, but is he droppable? My gut reaction is definitely still no, but I want to hear what you guys say about it.
I don't think so. He's been streakier than usual. I know he's been battling some physical issues as well. So this is the type of guy with proven track record where the second you tend to give up on them, that's when he goes on that extended hot streak. So he had a little bit of a run. I want to say like 2 weeks ago where he was hitting the cover off the ball. They gave him a little bit of rest and he reset kind of physically. So I wouldn't go drop him at this point. I think given the track record, you got to hope that he's able to turn things around. He's just too talented to struggle for this long. I know he's been dealing, like I said, some physical stuff, but you got to bet on the talent there and the track record.
For sure. And even as he's been bad this season, it has been bad. The on-base percentage is under 300. He's still pacing for something like 22 homers and something like 7 steals, which is not very far off from everything else. It's really just about that batting average bouncing back. And we kind of know how fickle batting averages can be. So got a nice little message here from JC. So what's up, guys? Now, follow-up question. I'm really struggling a relief pitcher. I'm desperate. 14 points. I have Yates, Palencia, I believe it's Daniel Palencia, Shelby Miller, but Garcia, Presley, and Cade Smith are on waivers. Save 7, holds 3 points. Thanks, guys. So I think this is kind of like an abbreviated save slash holds league. And I kind of like when points leagues give like a portion of points for holds versus saves, because I do think that the saves holds leagues or rotisserie leagues were overvaluing holds and undervaluing saves, because getting a hold in the seventh inning is not as valuable to a Major League Baseball team as finishing in the ninth. So this is kind of fun. But from that list, I tend to think you're okay with who you have. I think that you're going to get more saves and holds from that trio you have than any of the guys below. But besides maybe Cade Smith's inning to inning effectiveness and the strikeout upside he's giving you over someone like Yates, maybe, but Yates has been great on a per inning basis as well. Where Miller hasn't, but he has the guaranteed role. If I'm you, JC, I'm holding with those three you got.
Yeah, I think Palencia is going to pitch high leverage innings for the Cubs no matter what. Shelby Miller now takes over with Justin Martinez out for the year. AJ Puck, it's kind of there's just a nebulous timeline. I don't even know if he started throwing again.
I don't
So
believe so.
he's weeks, months away from coming back. He might not make it back at all this season, given the nature of the injury. So I think you're relatively good. Miller's got that closing experience. Like Jalen Beeks is the only other guy in that bullpen, I think, with any sort of closing experience at this point. So yeah, I think you're doing pretty well from that standpoint. I wouldn't drop any of those three.
And Palencia hasn't had the most save opportunities lately, but I do think that he's absolutely the bona fide closer in Chicago. The stuff is pretty lights out overall. I think that's someone that I would definitely be holding on to here. So now we have a starting pitching question. Another one from Dad. Brian Bayo recently started leaning towards a color in his most recent start, throwing 38 times against the Yankees for a 7 inning gem. Do we think this is a sign of things to come or a one off? I think throwing it 40 times in one start, that feels like to me a sign of things to come. I think I saw something that it was only about 20 colors thrown in his career to that point, and he threw 8 in the first inning of the start. Bayo's always been someone who's really been searching for another pitch to add with that changeup. Ironically, he's one of these righties that has almost sometimes a better repertoire for the lefties than the righties, because with that changeup, now you're adding this color. But he does have that sinker. That's a good weapon for him against righties. He's always been someone that felt like he was kind of circling the ball on being effective. The stuff is so good, visually so impressive. This probably is a meaningful step for him just to get another thing going here with that color.
Yeah, I think if you can add another wrinkle, especially against left-hand batters, that's going to be key for him. I think he had 13 swinging strikes in that outing against the Yankees. It doesn't give up a lot of home runs. So that's kind of been the thing with him throughout his career is, when he's going right, he's keeping the ball in the yard, limiting hard contact. Just the strikeout rate to me has always been the thing that I've never been able to get past with him. It feels like he should miss more bats than he does. But 8 strikeouts against the Yankees, that's a really tough lineup. I'll give him credit for making adjustments. It felt like a couple of weeks ago, there was the infamous moment when he started celebrating when I think he finished 6 innings, and it was like the first time he'd done that all year. And they were losing the game. So it's like trying to get him focused. I think it's an encouraging sign. Let's put it that way. I'm not anticipating some huge breakout based on him leaning on the cutter a little bit more, but yeah, it's a positive step in the right direction.
Yeah, this is all kind of the tale as old as time for a right-handed pitcher like Bayo, who is a changeup first guy, because again, the changeup will play better against left-handed batters. Now he's throwing this tight cutter as a pitch that isn't really moving. It's kind of staying mostly straight with a little bit of drop relative to what other cutters will give you. That's another pitch that generally a righty picks up to help them face a lefty. But when in this game against the Yankees, he threw it more often against right-handed batters, percentage base wise. But the Yankees still stacked the lineup with lefties. So I do think that color, while it is a valuable wrinkle, I think more it was a shock than maybe a very good pitch. Because if you're a hitter and you've never seen that before, you go back in the iPad, you're like, is Bayo throwing color? And they're like, yeah, I think Bayo's throwing a color. I think that pitch is a color. And then you start kind of trying to have to game plan in game. And while he was throwing this color, again, in a lineup that was mostly lefties, he also went away from his sweeper. So I think it's an interesting thing to watch Bayo as to how much those pitches work together in unison as he faces some lineups that maybe will lean more righty than this Yankees lineup, who kind of have the ability to platoon ad nauseum every single day with kind of a heap of too many left-handed power hitters right now for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been the approach for Andrew Bailey, the pitching coach for the Red Sox. I know you've written about it extensively. A lot of our colleagues have as well. It's kind of that pitching backwards method where it's leaning more on the off-speed stuff, breaking balls as opposed to being fastball heavy with the approach. So they're one of the organizations that stresses that. So it's interesting to see Bayo kind of tinkering with things. I think it's a positive sign.
Yeah, I'm going to call back now to the last conversation we were having comparing Stott to Mets, where we got Frank asking, better play this week, Bryson Stott or Ronnie Mauricio? I think that I use this phrase a lot of times in this chat. if you're a dreamer, I would do Ronnie Mauricio because Ronnie Mauricio could have 1 or 2 games this week, and maybe the 3, 4, or 5 that he winds up playing, where he can produce more than Bryson Stott might in the 6 that he plays this week. But if you want to go for the safe option, it's certainly Bryson Stott.
Just kind of looking at who they're going to face in the series. It looks like it's
The-
all righties because it's Miami for Philly
Yeah,
this week. So Cal Quantrill, Freddie Tarnok, Edward Cabrera, Jansen Jung. You know, I think I'd maybe give Stott a shot because it looks like he's going to play in every one of those games. There's no lefty he's going to face where he'd be on the bench. So,
and the Mets
I
have a
think,
difficult week. The Mets have
yeah,
Braves and Phillies. They're facing Sale, they're facing Schwellenbach, and I forgot the other pitcher they're facing for the Braves. But just the fact that Sale, there's something going on right now. Ronnie Mauricio splits where he is a significantly better hitter from the left side compared to the right. His chase rate as a right-handed batter is kind of approaching 50%, which is a horrible place to be for a major league player. Where from the left side is very palatable, close to 30. So I do think that we're gonna stop seeing Ronnie Mauricio face left-handed pitching, and I believe the Mets are facing at least 2 this week if I remember their schedule correctly.
yeah, they're definitely going to get Sale at one point during that series, right? So,
Yes, they have Sale for sure.
Mauricio is like one of those guys. See, we talked
Sale
about
and Luzardo.
dynasty. Yeah, we talked about dynasty kind of rankings and approach. He's one of those guys I kind of gravitate to because the all around skill set's so intriguing. I really like him long term. I'm just not optimistic over the next few months. Like the playing time's gonna be hard to come by, and then he's still coming back off the knee injuries. So give him some time. But I think long term, he's one of those really fascinating talents. He's a guy I want to be rostering in a long term format.
He's fascinating is the word because you watch Ronnie Mauricio play, he does something you're like, wow. And you watch him do something else, you're like, wow, come on, man. Because like it's a very frustrating build. I've compared him to, in terms of like a high end potential, like maybe his 90th percentile outcome to an Ozzy Albies, which is funny because Mauricio's 6'4" and Ozzy Albies is 5'5". But I do think that in terms of like you can have someone who's a low OBP masher, can play second base quite well, and that's using him more third right now because he has a cannon for an arm. But it's you're never going to get very steady production from a guy like Ronnie Mauricio because he refuses to take a walk and he loves chasing pitches out of the strike zone. But now another question here from friend of the program, Bassbone, staying on the infield. Brooks Lee, Chase Mydroth, Tyler Fitzgerald, assuming, or Matt Shaw in a 5x5 with hits instead of average.
I think I'd lean Lee right now because he's been hot lately. He's going to play third base every day with Royce Lewis on the injured list. So he had a really good week, nice weekend. So yeah, Brooks Lee's a guy who was a top prospect for the Twins. Kind of never really put it together last year when he got opportunities. It hasn't been there this year, but he's on a good stretch right now. And the thing about Royce Lewis is that they're saying it's a mild hamstring strain and they expect him back pretty soon. Given what we know about Royce Lewis, I would anticipate this being a multi-week absence, even in a best case scenario. It might be on the more mild end of the spectrum, but I wouldn't count on him being back in 10 days or anything like that. That's not a lock.
No, for sure. I've fallen in love with Chase Mydroth this year. I think him as a player is so unique in the landscape, and something that got me really excited about him about 3 weeks ago now, and I think he kind of hit his peak so far this season, was the fact that he was stealing bases as aggressively as basically any player in the league. But now we've gotten 2 weeks and he has not stolen a base. So I looked a little stupid saying that, proclaiming that to the world a few weeks ago. But you're good looking at the guy who's going to run a high batting average, high on base percentage, and hit towards the top of the order, which you can't really say about all these guys. I think Matt Shaw, in terms of the last month, has been one of the more disappointing players because it looks like there was a click with him when he came back to the minor leagues. He went from being the most closed off hitter in baseball to like the second or third most closed off hitter in baseball in terms of stance in the box, but it has now kind of fallen down again, and it looks like the Cubs might have been a little quick triggered with him to the major leagues this season.
But again, that goes back to the point I was trying to make about the gap between AAA and the majors. Like he goes down, he starts mashing in AAA again, and everybody's like, okay, Matt Shaw's back. And then he comes back to the big leagues. I think he got off to a really nice start first couple of games, but it's again, we go through these adjustment periods with top prospects, and that's what makes it so tricky is these guys, they're on such quick trajectories to the big leagues that they, you think they're going to come up and make a huge impact. A lot of times they struggle and it takes a while. So just kind of temper your expectations with a lot of these top prospects. But I think Mydroth, that's a really good point. He's sort of the high floor, consistent option. It'd be nice if you were stealing more bases because it's not like Brooks Lee is exactly a speed demon either. But I think just the way they're swinging right now, Brooks Lee's kind of the guy who makes sense for me as a short-term stopgap. If you're looking at like rest of season over the final 2+ months here, I think Mydroth makes a lot more sense there.
And you get I know Brooksley has as well, but you get the second base, the third base, the
Yeah.
shortstop eligibility, middle infield, corner infield, can move around a lot. Guys, remember, any questions you want, jump in the chat. We're running through here, getting everything. Staying with you guys till about 1 o'clock. We have another question here, another weirdly a Giants infielder. Thoughts on Casey Schmidt from Frank? Well, I won for $1 this week in NFBC. I think that's fair. $1 for Casey Schmidt. I think it's hard to expect a lot from him at this point. He'll come back to the major leagues. We kind of brushed over Tyler Fitzgerald in the last question. He has not hit well at all this year. Kind of unsurprisingly, considering his very high strikeout rate, which he's actually managed to cut down this year. But I think that less aggressiveness from Tyler Fitzgerald has caused him to be less productive because he's swinging at less pitches, especially in the middle of the plate. I think trying to work these deeper counts, sometimes that's just a bit unnatural for players, and disappointingly for Tyler Fitzgerald, he's not getting the power anymore either. I don't know what's going to happen to the Giants next couple of days. I feel like we're going to see a couple more roster moves as they try to get this new team together around Rafael Devers while they're also still have Matt Chapman out. This to me was an indication that, ironically, Rafael Devers still is not going to be playing third base. He's still going to be still going to be a designated hitter, which I think is funny for a team that currently doesn't have a third baseman for the next few weeks. But I don't have the highest hopes for Casey Schmidt.
No, I've never been a Casey Schmidt guy. He actually got hurt on Sunday, suffered a foot injury, fouled the ball off his foot. So, look, the opportunity is there for him to play a little bit at first base for now. I've never seen, anything there that makes me want to roster him. Now, NFBC is extremely deep. You'll take anybody with a pulse, I think, in those types of formats. So, yeah, he's intriguing for a buck. But look, I'm not that into Casey Schmidt. I think, is now the time to talk about Rafael Devers? Like,
might as well, yeah, because it's funny, the Rafael Devers trade, like similar to the Shohei Ohtani news, where it's like these aren't exactly fancy, relevant pieces of information, but these are the biggest pieces of news that we've gotten so far this season. I was stupefied last night watching when that trade happened. I was sitting Father's Day with my dad and my uncle, and then my uncle's a monster Yankee fan, and we're Mets fans. We're like, oh my God, just started screaming. My girlfriend's like, oh my God, is everything okay? I'm like, Rafael Devers got traded. What are you talking about? But it's crazy. Like, I can't remember a trade in season this far away from the trade deadline happening in a long time. And this is incredible news if you're a Giants fan, because you've just gotten the best hitter that you've had on your team 20 years. I don't know. Like, I don't want to compare. You never compare someone to Barry Bonds, but in terms of like how good of a hitter is on this roster. The Giants haven't had 30 home run players since Barry Bonds. And now you just picked up Rafael Devers in the middle of June. Like, this is immaculate for their franchise.
Devers is the type of generational franchise-altering hitter that you dream about, and for the Giants, they jumped up the opportunity to make this deal. There's so much to unpack, and I don't want to go into the machinations of like why the deal transpired for Boston, because I live in New England, so I've had to hear about this for weeks now, the drama and everything that's swirled around the motivations for the trade. I think I question is why now, and why was this the return? Because if you're pivoting to a future where Roman Anthony is now the undisputed face of your franchise and you're trying to get this money off of the books, like why wasn't the return more prospect oriented and from a long-term focus? I think Kyle Harrison's an intriguing arm, but they didn't really get a ton in this deal. I would have waited. And like you said, the Giants are desperate to find a left-handed power bat. They've been openly talking about it for months, if not years now. And since Buster Posey's taken over, he's always been saying that he was going to make this big move, and they were trying to, figure out what their next, superstar was going to look like. And I think the Red Sox would have done better if they had waited. It doesn't sound like they were shopping Devers across the league. So there was some urgency on their part to get this done. And it's one of the more shocking trades we've ever seen, especially at this point of the season, where I felt like they could have waited a little bit longer and maybe done a little better playing the Giants against some of their other contenders in the National League.
It does seem like the thing they wanted most was the full money being taken. Because if any team seems like wants to take all the money, you can take Rafael Devers. And getting back someone like Kyle Harrison, who's not far removed from being one of the better pitching prospects in baseball, but also clearly having massive deficiencies that have stopped him from being effective at the major league level, mainly never being able to develop more pitches besides that fastball, which is a great fastball, but doesn't really allow him the depth of repertoire to be good. And James Tibbs is a first round pick from the most previous draft. He's someone who probably is a low variance, high floor hitting prospect with decent swing decisions, decent athleticism. That's something that I'm sure their front office likes, but it's just kind of an awkward return. It's very clear that it was all about the money. And as a Red Sox fan going through this last 5 years you've seen with this team, it's probably very frustrating for your organization to make another move that seemed to be all about the money, because all you keep hearing is about like, get out from these contracts, start spending again, be the Red Sox again, be the Red Sox again. you kind of had this push and pull where you trade for Garrett Crochet, got the massive deal. You get Alex Bregman. You're kind of rolling through the first chunk of the season. Now you're hitting the struggles. Now you're starting to play a little bit better again. And now you trade your best player. So it's like, is more coming? Do you trade Jarren Duran now? Like, where actually is the Red Sox window of contention? Because it's kind of a hard one to spot. Does this make Alex Bregman less likely to opt back into his contract? I think these are all really fair questions that if you're a Red Sox fan, you probably are waking up and going through your day today asking yourself nonstop.
Yeah, I mean, I could give you 30 minutes on the Mookie Betts trade if we want to rehash that. I mean, that one never made sense to me either.
Somehow
but
worse.
Look, I think that what you're speaking to is the big question for the Red Sox. Like, what direction are they going? Are they contenders? Are they all in? Are they pivoting to this more of a multi-year build around the big three? Like, what is this team? I think that's the big question. Now that Devers is gone, it's like, okay, your lineup is exponentially worse. You have more flexibility financially and in terms of what you can do in terms of putting a lineup out there every day. But this doesn't solve the core issues about making your team a championship contender. I think it goes sort of in the opposite direction. So that's the big question for me now. It's like, where do they go from here? They're going to be a fascinating team to watch over the next few weeks. Because like you said, if they fall out of it, there's a lot of moves they can make.
Totally. And it seems like they're actively going to fall out of it. It does feel like that after trading your best hitter. Now having a lineup that is suddenly not intimidating in any way, shape, or form for opposing pitchers. Young lineup, it's a fun lineup, but you have, I don't know, you're going to have, right now, roster resources, Carlos Narvaez hitting third for the Boston Red Sox. I think if you're the Boston Red Sox, that's something that it's a reality you don't exactly want to be in. And somehow David Hamilton's designated hitter, which I really hope that's something that doesn't come to fruition. But they're a very strangely constructed team at the moment. I think probably pound for pound, talent-wise, suddenly the least talented team in their own division.
It's not great. They're going to get Willie Abreu back. He'll probably factor into the rotation. He's such a good defender. Like, you're going to put him in right field. I don't know if it makes sense to have Roman Anthony DH every day. It feels like a tough way to break a top prospect into the majors. You've seen a lot of organizations try that, and it hasn't worked. Like Kobe Mayo is like a good example of that. So, yeah, look, they got some serious questions to answer, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do over the next 2 weeks. Like, that's the big question for me. They're going out west on this big road trip. They're in Seattle starting tonight. Like, this is going to be a big series and a big week for the Red Sox.
Yeah, with a shock that must be to that locker room. All right, Devers talk. If you guys want more Devers talk, throw a question about it because I'd be happy to do more. But back to your guys' questions from Perry right now. Evan Carter breakout last week before injury, real or flash in the pan? I tend to think real adjacent because we've seen Carter hit these top end performances before. Like as a 20-year-old, he was a star of the playoffs and World Series 2 years ago. Still just 22, but has struggled with the back. He had the quad a couple weeks ago. This Rangers lineup is one, though, I've been watching very closely for a few weeks now because coming into the season, projections had them pegged as one of the best in the league, arguably the best in the league. And now they were one of the worst lineups at this point in the season. They just had a series against the Twins where in 2 separate games they put up 16 runs apiece. They had another slightly cold series over the weekend, but they're a team where if they start to click, you kind of want every single piece of this lineup you could possibly get. And that's kind of where I'm at with Carter, more so than seeking the star upside we thought we saw 2 years ago.
I'm the wrong person to ask on Evan Carter because I unabashedly love him as a player. I was a huge fan when he first arrived on the scene. I thought the back injury really is problematic because it kind of not only does it eliminate like development time and at bats, and it felt like it sapped his confidence a little bit. Like when you miss that much time and then you struggle so badly, like it kind of takes away what makes you what separates you from the rest of the league, like as a top prospect. So it's nice to see him looking confident at the plate again. I think now that he's got a little bit of that swagger back, he's stealing bases, he's hitting for power. I think last week was the first time that he and Wyatt Langford homered in the same game. Like that's going to happen a lot over the next few years. So look, if he's feeling confident, I think that goes a long way. Like I can't give you a specific number that's going to say, oh, he's back, but just watching how he's been swinging and kind of, just from a mental standpoint, having the confidence back is going to be huge for him. So yeah, he could be a real difference maker because they could use him in the middle of that lineup.
And before that quad injury, actually had the hardest hit ball of his major career, the 111.1 miles an hour. So there's at least a power stroke with Evan Carter that we haven't exactly seen in a few years.
It's never been a talent issue with him. It's can he stay healthy? And right now he is, and he's producing. So yeah, I'd be in.
And also, likely will still be sitting against every single left-handed pitcher. It's another thing to add in to get Evan Carter. As the Rangers suddenly have a weird logjam in their outfield because as Carter got hot, that came in a week that they pretty much told Adolis Garcia to just take the week off. So this is going to be funny how they kind of fill this playing time together. But another struggling young player here, question from Jeddah. Matt McLain worth rostering in 12-team head-to-head league. George?
Boy, McLain's one of the guys I think I missed on a lot. He's riding a 4-game hitting streak at the moment, which is nice. Had a home run, I think it was on Friday. He's one of the more disappointing players for me this season. I don't really understand when you look at the projections. He kind of graded out as a top 5 second baseman, no matter how you ran the numbers. Like, I think we as a staff are looking at things internally going like, how does he not finish top 5, top 7 at the position? And that I think to me is the mystery right now, because he's mostly batted near the bottom of the order. It's been a really tough year for him. He struck out a ton. And this comes off where he looked really good in the Arizona Fall League and then, was healthy through spring training. So there were a lot of reasons for optimism, but it just kind of hasn't come together for him. So, yeah, I could see wanting to move off of him in a shallower mixed league. Like, that makes sense. But like we talked about in the first, start few minutes of the show, there's not a lot of depth at second base. So when you're looking at higher upside options, he's probably right there.
Yeah, I mean, I will push back on the fact that the 25-year-old looked good in the Arizona Fall League. I don't know if that's exactly a reason for optimism, but it is weird looking at McLain's profile and his just standing on a Reds team that's begun to play well, one of the best parks to hit in all of baseball, and being like, everything you're doing underlying looks the same as what you did in 2023 when you were one of the most exciting young players in the league. And for some reason now, things are not clicking. It probably is a bit of a lesson that players with pretty good physical tools, but then you see that low bat speed who maybe struggle with contact rates are likely a bit more of fickle profiles, but still, it shouldn't be this fickle. Like, Matt McLain shouldn't, even as bad as he's been, he shouldn't be this bad. Luckily, it still has a 20 home or 25 steal pace, which is saving a lot of his value, but you see a 280 on base percentage and you kind of shiver goes down your spine.
He batted second on Sunday, so that's at least one little encouraging sign. That's the first time that happened in a while. So just something to watch going forward.
All right, now we have a two-parter from Couchad going to the Dodgers, starting to get some Ohtani talk here because I think we're due for it. Do you foresee Sheehan being run behind an opener with his pitch count? Would that increased win potential make him more viable play this week in his return? And then follow-up, similar question, would you play Shohei two-step purely for ratios? So I think that the Dodgers are kind of funny using these guys instead of making minor league rehab assignments, like you want to just pitch a few innings at the major league level, and we'll kind of figure it out around you because they're so starved for innings. Ohtani can't take a rehab assignment because then who's gonna hit leadoff for this team at the major league level? He's just that good. But I think that, of course, I'm assuming there's a question in deeper league, Cow Chad, because this is the kind of question that you'd ask when you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel, like trying to figure out tiny little edges. For Ohtani this week, if this is a Yahoo league where he's pitcher only, because I know most nights he's one player, you have to pick your spot. I guess if your other options are bad, I would consider him at pitcher only. Just do this two-step purely for the ratios. But I'm assuming you're getting 5 innings combined, and I'd be very afraid of using someone purely for the ratios in their first time pitching in 18 months. That to me is a red flag.
Yeah, so 5 innings might be optimistic. He threw, I think, 44 pitches his last time in his last live batting practice session. So, and look, if there's any sign of we don't like how this is going, they are going to pull the plug faster than anything because you need his bat in the lineup. They can't risk anything going wrong here. So if he starts getting up there from a pitch count standpoint, he's going to get lifted mid-inning. So there's a lot of ways this could go wrong. I think expecting him to go out there and strike out 3 guys in a scoreless frame and then walk off into the sunset, yeah, that could happen, but that's the more likely scenario is that, he gets an inning in the books and then you're kind of watching that number going, once he gets to 35, 40, it's like, okay, is this the last batter? So just be careful. There's going to be a real limit to what he does from a workload standpoint. And the Dodgers, there's zero incentive for them to push him from an inning standpoint. So this is purely about going out there, throwing, feeling comfortable. Don't worry about the results. And hopefully when we get to the playoffs, you have a viable starter there and those innings matter. So I would be very cautious about from the workload standpoint. I just don't think the volume is going to be there for you to use him in fantasy right now this week.
Yeah, I even think the expectation that Shohei could be a viable starter at any point this year still seems far-fetched, even when he's making his first appearance in June. He's only faced live hitters 3 times since 2023. Yeah. Like, he's never pitched as a member of the Dodgers. It feels like he's been a Dodger our whole lives already, which is kind of an incomprehensible thing to think about. Where Sheehan, on the other hand, I think is more interesting. He's worked his way up. He's at least gotten to a fourth inning as minor league rehab assignments. He's someone that has I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. I think he's someone that the Dodgers could expect to eat more innings as the season progresses, just because he has significantly less on his plate than Shohei Ohtani, who's the blatantly second best hitter in baseball. I think that it could get to a point where Emmett Sheehan is someone that's looked upon as a reliable starter at some point this season. Probably not at the moment. Maybe you do get the opener before him, and he kind of works as a different Ben Kasparius type in the rotation, but even still, the Dodgers have been so tight with all of their pitcher usage all year. They know that their margins are so much better than every other team in the league, where they just are avoiding blowups. They want to keep avoiding injuries as much as they can because they've not been able to do so. He, to me, is as a pitcher, is more interesting. But even just thinking about Yuri Perez's debut last week, where like you could have thrown Yuri Perez in for the two-step in his return. I don't know. I'm only going to get 6 or 7 innings from these two starts, but I'm probably going to get great ratios. We got crushed on Monday. He didn't get any strikeouts on Sunday. So this is what can happen when these guys return. It's a very unsteady moment when these pitchers come back after these long layoffs.
Yeah, and you look at the strikeouts in those rehab assignments for Sheehan, they're off the charts, but don't expect that against the Padres on Wednesday. That's a really
Talking
good
about
line.
the difference between AAA and the majors, even though half the Padres lineup is a AAA lineup, so I will give you that. But I would, if I had any other options, I'd be strongly looking at them instead of these Dodgers guys at the moment.
I think Kasparius is a guy. I think Eric Samolsky, our colleague, wrote about him over the weekend as a guy who can help out in the ratio department. Don't expect huge strikeout upside, but Kasparius to me is interesting. I really like him. He's done a nice job this year. Yeah, and Sheehan, I think they're going to let him go as far as he can from a workload standpoint. I don't think there's going to be a ton of restrictions from a pitch count standpoint, but limited ceiling there. The control wasn't great when he debuted before Tommy John, so just keep that in mind. Like it's not a huge upside profile for Sheehan.
Yeah, another follow up here from Cal Chad, probably giving us hints as to the other options. Quinn Priester, 8 consecutive starts of at least 5 innings pitched and 3 earned runs or less. What's the rest of season outlook? And since Biss is here and has regained some of that top former prospect luster for Dynasty.
Oh man, Chad's good. He knows his stuff. Look, if you want to talk about interesting prospects in Milwaukee, you got Mizrowski and then you got Logan Henderson too. So look, Priester's done a really nice job. I just think it's more of a back end rotation type of profile. He never reached that elite prospect status that his draft pedigree would have pretended. So I never will understand why the Red Sox were done with him in like late March. They were like, no, we're good. And then they immediately needed rotation help. So it never made a ton of sense to me there. But yeah, Priester's done a nice job. And I think he's a guy in deeper mixed leagues that you can rely on the rest of the season. There's going to be opportunities for him to start in Milwaukee unless things completely go sideways. So yeah, I think Priester in a deeper league, just the ceiling's not there for me. I'm not the huge Priester guy, but he's been good. It's hard to deny what he's been doing this year.
Yeah, it is funny. This is the exact type of player and profile. It happens every year with the Brewers. It feels like every year in the middle of the season, we have to evaluate this pitcher on the Brewers who doesn't seem that good, doesn't really have a good fastball, but has a good ERA. Do we trust him moving forward? Priester's another one of these pitchers in this bucket of guys that don't have politely even fastballs in general. I think that's always the thing that held him back from that elite ceiling. Like it's a sinker guy. The Brewers have helped him with his cutter this season. That's been the weapon for him against left-handed batters. But he's still throwing 40% sinkers against those left-handed batters. So I do think that you will have some ERA correction at some point for Quinn Priester, while also feeling like he's, I think, clearly he's a useful pitcher in deeper 12-team mixed leagues and every 15-team league. But also, I don't think he's getting back any of that top prospect luster ever probably in his career.
I just looked up, he's got a 16% strikeout rate this season over 67 2/3 innings. So yeah, I think with the ERA right now about 3.5, I think it's closer to 4 based on the underlying metrics like FIP, XFIP, everything's closer to 4. So yeah, there's going to be some pullback in the run prevention department, but reliable, innings eater in the back end of that Milwaukee rotation for sure, which that's not nothing, but it's not a fantasy ace type of profile. There's no next step, no leap coming there.
No, and I heard you take a shot at Craig Breslow there during that, so I'm going to bring it back another Rafael Devers question. We got a couple follow-ups down here in the chat. So from James, shout out every James out there. In a week-to-week categories league, do you prefer Rafael Devers or Vlad Guerrero Jr. for the rest of the season? I think it's kind of interesting, actually, because Devers is probably not going to be as productive moving from Fenway Park to Oracle. Like, it's just a significantly harder place to hit. I think he is oddly getting a slight lineup upgrade, which is funny to say, going from the Red Sox to the Giants, but Vlad Guerrero has it's mean to say that he's meandered this season because he's still been a very good player, but he hasn't exactly dominated. Like, you're not getting the Vlad Guerrero that's crushing the world. The OPS is still under 800, as it's been now for alternating seasons his entire career, which is kind of strange for a player just because it was guaranteed $500 million. But it's I still tend to lean Guerrero every single time I get asked these questions. I usually pick Guerrero, and almost every single time I end up failing by picking Guerrero and having less production on my teams. But that's just where I always tend to go with stuff like this.
We tend to take it's a recency bias, but we tend to overlook the past in favor of what we're watching right now. And the thing with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is that he has tended to have these stretches where he can get molten lava hot for several weeks and go on these tears where, yeah, he's been pretty ice cold at the start of the season. But would it be shocking if he went on a run here for the next couple of weeks and batted like 350 with a bunch of home runs? Like, no. And this is where we get to talk about the park factor standpoint with Rafael Devers. It doesn't impact him as greatly as it would other hitters. Like, I remember
he's that good.
Yes. And I kind of sounded alarms a little bit in the offseason with Kyle Tucker. I said, well, Wrigley Field's been a really bad park for left-handed power the last few years, and it made me look stupid. So the moral of the story is, yes, park factors matter for everybody. They do matter even for elite hitters. But when you're talking about guys that are Hall of Fame caliber talents, it doesn't impact them so much. You always bet on that caliber of talent. So I think Oracle's a tough place to hit for left-handed power. It might rob him of maybe a home run or two, something like that, but it's not going to really adversely impact him. And I do like the fit in that lineup. He's going to kind of be the centerpiece there. And at some point, they're going to get Bryce Eldridge up. Maybe August, September, he fills the hole at first base. So it's going to be a really interesting team once they get to that point. You kind of have a real it's going to be real interesting at that point.
I mean, by far the funniest outcome of this entire situation would be if Rafael Devers starts playing first base for the San Francisco Giants. Like, I think to me that would be the icing on the cake for all of us. Red Sox fans would probably just collectively lose their minds, I think, respectfully. It's also funny to think about how strange Fenway Park plays compared to other ballparks. Because Rafael Devers, like we're saying, tremendous power, true Hall of Fame talent as a hitter if he keeps this up for another decade or so. He does have an inordinate amount of opposite field power, much more than most other players. But a lot of times at Fenway Park, that opposite field power will turn into doubles, but more often for a guy like Devers, actually singles off the Green Monster. Where at Oracle Park, that left field fence is very attainable for Devers. So you might actually sneak into more opposite field home runs for Devers compared to what you would have done at Fenway Park while losing a lot of that pull side power, that power alley in right center field in what's Triples Alley in Oracle Park. And it is funny you talk about Tucker because I did worry about that too this year, especially watching Cody Bellinger just flounder out there last season, not be able to get the ball out at all. But good reminder that the players in the middle, it's much easier for their values to change a lot by small environmental factors like that rather than the players at the top.
Yeah, like that might have been a Cody Bellinger thing, not a
very much, yeah,
exclusive to him. It's an interesting point about Devers. And the only other thing I want to hit on with him is there's going to be sort of another adjustment period as he acclimates to facing National League pitching for the first time. These are a lot of pitchers he hasn't faced a ton before, so there's going to be that too. That's something to watch. Kind of see guys when they switch leagues. Sometimes they don't go full JD Martinez and like bat 400 over the last 2 months after they get traded at the trade deadline. So it's not always immediate success. So there might be a little bit of a adjustment there for him too. So there's a lot of variables to watch with the Devers situation. It's fascinating that it's this early in the year. Like you don't usually see this. This is crazy.
No, which is crazy. Another good follow-up here from Chad. So much of the current playoff market, as we were talking about the return before, just isn't situated to take on all of that money other than the Giants, Mets, Dodgers, maybe Astros. So it's not surprising they went for that package. I wanted to bring this question up because we were just talking about the Chicago Cubs. And one of the most interesting parts about this trade is that the Giants were able to pull this off without even going over the first threshold of the luxury tax. It says a lot, oddly, about how tight Farhan Zaidi kept this team over the last few years. Of course, not being able to take that step, but keeping their books very clean. Mostly their books were clean by accident because they tried to throw money at every single player that was willing to take it over the last few seasons. They just didn't. The Cubs were another team that were in that exact same payroll threshold as the Giants, where they could have taken on Rafael Devers' money and not got into the luxury tax, which is incomprehensible for a team like Chicago Cubs, which in terms of revenue is always near the top of the league, where you have teams like the Dodgers and the Mets, who they're already into the third threshold. Any dollar they would have spent on Rafael Devers would have been taxed 110%. So $250 million remaining on a contract would become something well over $500 million. There should be a disappointment, I think, if you're a Cubs fan right now. It's not being quantified right now in national baseball media because as this team has been one of the biggest stories, best stories in baseball this season, getting Kyle Tucker, not extending him, PCA taking a superstar step forward, having a gaping hole at third base, like we mentioned before with Matt Shaw and Justin Turner playing there more often than not. Where are the Chicago Cubs in trying to call for a guy that all you have to do is eat a big contract, and you have someone that you could even get away with playing him at third base for the next 5 or so years, at least 3 or so years, till he continues to deteriorate? That to me would be very disappointing if I was a fan of that team.
Yeah, so based on the reporting so far, there are only a handful of teams that the Red Sox I think even spoke to. The Padres are one of them. I think the Blue Jays, bizarrely enough, are one of them too. Also, Craig Breslow has a history with the Chicago Cubs too, right? So there may have been some reluctance to then deal with them directly on a trade of this magnitude. I don't know. It's different with every executive. You see a lot of them over the years. Some guys like to deal with the former organization. Other guys avoid them.
And I think that sometimes we forget how much of a person-to-person element these trades are, especially as we all play fantasy baseball and do have these kinds of conversations in our leagues all the time, where it's like, the managers in your leagues that you're going to be able to trade with more easy than the other ones. And this is true in real life. I had former general manager Zach Scott on my Mets podcast a few months ago, and I asked him point blank, I was like, what is it like? How do you open these conversations? Is it a text? Is it a call? Is it an email? Like, is it a friend? It's like, what actually goes on? He's like, usually if you have a relationship, you reach out to the person. If you know someone in the organization has a relationship with someone in their organization, you do it first. You let them do it first as a friend. Text, call, email, whatever it is. At the end of the day, it's strikingly not that dissimilar from what we do in our leagues, which I think is the easy part to forget about these trades because of how much higher stakes they are.
There's the infamous Jerry DiPoto texting at like 2 a.m. Like, hey, what about this trade?
Hey, you up? Yeah.
So, look, I just think this trade doesn't get done without the consent and backing of ownership. So it seems to me as though a trade of this magnitude was ownership driven, and it was facilitated on some sort of a deadline where the Giants must have said, at a certain point, we're no longer taking the whole contract and your return diminishes from there. So if there was some arbitrary deadline imposed where it was, we're going to do this, it's now. Yeah, that seems to make sense from a timing standpoint. I don't know if we'll ever get the full details. Well, I don't know if we'll ever get the now they tell us story, the oral history of the Rafael Devers trade. But yeah, there's definitely something going on where this was in the works for a while between these two clubs, and then there was some sort of a deadline where it was like, all right, if we're doing this, it's now.
Yeah, what an absolute travesty that Netflix decided to follow around the Boston Red Sox last season when nothing interesting happened at all. Now this season's been one of the more interesting seasons in recent memory, but it's a funny one. And also at the end of the day, like, you're taking $250 million. Here's an interesting pitcher that's major league capable and ready, and here's a first round pick from last year. At the end of the day, with all that money, that's not horrific if what you're looking for is to get out of that money, but it's still hard to stomach.
For me, the frustrating thing is, like, you're the Boston Red Sox, your advantage over the rest of the league. Allegedly, your advantage is that you have the financial resources to be able to absorb that type of financial hit to get a greater return on your investment in that trade. So yeah, that to me is the frustrating part. It's operating like a small market team where it's like, well, now we have the financial flexibility. It's just, okay, sure. This is,
I mean, you need small market teams like the Boston Red Sox to give their talent to the Dodgers, the Giants, and the Padres out west there where there's no money. And also, if you know a Padres fan, reach out to them, because while the Dodgers got Mookie Betts, the Giants got Rafael Devers, the Padres have Xander Bogaerts on by far the worst contract of the trio. So that's also another little twisted knife for them.
They did the Juan Soto trade. It's not like they did nothing in the last half.
Yeah,
like
they make a lot of plays, but they're not always successful plays. All right, let's get back to some nitty gritty fancy stuff. Sticking with the fallout of this Devers trade because we're still hot on it, but getting back to your guys' questions here. From Blurtrin again, will Abraham Toro of Twitch stick around in the Red Sox lineup? I tend to lean no because of what we've seen from Abraham Toro in the past, but I'll tell you this, he now has a lot more opportunities to do so.
Well, I think Alex Cora likes Abraham Toro, and all he has to do is say, hey, you just traded my best hitter. Like, I'm getting what I want here. Yeah, the flexibility helps. We don't have an exact timeline here for Alex Bregman. I mean, the last update I remember is that he has a checkup where they're going to do more testing to see how much healing's taken place and whether he can resume baseball activities. But even if that takes place, I think it's this week, you're still talking like several weeks where he needs to ramp up activity, then go on a rehab assignment, get his timing back. So Toro has a multi-week opportunity here to continue playing between first and third. He's going to play mostly against lefties, I think. That's no matter what. And yeah, he's been hitting the ball well. So deeper leagues, sure. But like you said, based on the track record, like it's Abraham Toro. He's not all of a sudden going to become Max Muncy and have a 10-year career here. Like I don't think that's happening. But nice story, good find for the front office, and deserves some credit for coming in and playing well, taking advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, especially as a very anti-Max Muncy profile where he just takes hacks, swings at everything with no bat speed whatsoever. And I do remember the update we got from Alex Bregman was like 2 weeks ago now, where his recovery was apparently moving at warp speed, whatever that means. So you always be aware of these weird sayings these players are trying to give you. But we have another one here, another follow-up from Chad about the Devers trade. Well, with Slayton still injured, could Jordan Hicks, the other member of this trade that was going from the Giants to the Red Sox, seemingly mostly as a salary dump, find his way into a setup role and vulture some saves on Chapman rest days? I do think that, at least I'm assuming that Jordan Hicks will come to the Red Sox as a relief pitcher. The Red Sox have somehow more depth in their rotation than they do in their bullpen, and also Hicks. I just think the starting experiment with Jordan Hicks has kind of failed somewhat spectacularly over the last year plus. I don't think that he's exactly equipped to handle that role in terms of pitch mix, in terms of his body, in terms of anything. It just seems like he's better suited as a reliever. So I will assume that, and you got to think that he probably does become one of the more higher leverage guys in that Boston bullpen.
The big problem is he doesn't miss bats. Yes, he throws hard, but you want your guys in late inning situations to have the ability to strike guys out. And I don't know that we're getting that with Hicks. He's been out with a foot bruise, basically. He's started throwing again. He's been throwing bullpen sessions. You got to think it's going to be pretty quick to get him back up and running again. Yeah, I think he'll factor into their kind of like high leverage mix as like a bridge guy to Chapman, but Chapman's been pretty combustible. It's remarkable he's been as consistent as he has been this year, because there are some days he's Carlos Marmol out there where he can walk 5 guys and melt down completely on you. But to his credit, it hasn't really happened this year. So Slayton's, it's interesting because he's dealing with a nerve-related issue in that shoulder. So there's kind of no timeline. Like we saw Parker Meadows miss, I think it was a couple months now, with that issue before coming back. So I think he ended up being like out 3 months basically. With a similar type of nerve issue. So you just never know with those things, because he can't really do anything until the pain kind of subsides and the issue goes away. So yeah, the Red Sox, again, I don't know how they get better from here, because they have some massive problems with the bullpen right now.
Yeah, I think the interesting part of this question is that I'm expecting an Aroldis Chapman trade, which can open up save opportunities in Boston for a second half team that's not going to win many games, to put it bluntly. But I think that it's interesting. I blurred Chapman last week, and looking at him, I'm like, he had a really good year. Like, is this real? Right now, Aroldis Chapman is running the lowest walk rate of his entire career. His entire illustrious 16-year Major League Baseball career. He has the lowest walk rate right now as a 37-year-old that still throws 102 miles an hour. So I think what's gone on with him is very real this season. The Andrew Bailey pitching lab up in Boston has gotten through the Aroldis Chapman, and something has happened where he is very, very, very capable of throwing strikes, at least at a higher rate than he literally ever has in his entire Major League career that began in 2010 with the Cincinnati Reds as a starting pitcher. Like, he is someone that, in terms of the closer landscape in fantasy baseball right now, he's one of the pitchers I trust the most relative to where they began or this season.
If you had told me he was going to lose the closing role like on April 5th, I would have been like, yeah, I can see that. Like the range of outcomes there is just so wide. So yeah, it just goes back to like, we never know. That's why you throw a dart at 5 late round closers and hope you get one of them out of it every spring, because you just never really know with these guys. We got a Jonah Tong question that's interesting.
Yeah, we got a couple from here. Dad repeated the Jonah Tong question. I was going to get to that one next. Get some more quick ones here. About 5 minutes to go till we leave you guys now. But Jonah Tong, 1.97 ERA and 0.97 WHIP, 96 strikeouts and 51 1/3 innings over 12 starts, Double-A this season. 14.6 strikeouts per 9 innings. Do we think he pushes for a spot this season, or is he a 2026 option? So there's 2 things working right now with Jonah Tong in the Mets, and they're kind of working in reverse of each other. One, he's definitely behind a lot of other starting pitcher prospects who've already pitched at AAA. Nolan McLain has torn through AAA this season. Brandon Sproat has struggled at AAA, but he's still he's like 25 years old. He pitched multiple full SEC seasons. He's more equipped to be a major league starter. But those players were drafted after Tong, who came out of Canada as a 19-year-old a few years ago, kind of came out of nowhere to become this pitching prospect as a small, wiry, I'll still say kid, as a 21-year-old. Jonah Tong's timeline to be added to the Mets 40-man roster is by the end of this season. So while Nolan McLean's and Brandon Sproat's is not, I think they're both next year. Maybe McLean's 1 year after Sproat. Well, those guys seem more ready to be major league pitchers. They're more physically equipped, probably major league pitchers. Tong has to be on the Mets 40-man roster before them. So if there's an option to add either Jonah Tong or Nolan McLean to the Mets major league roster, there will be an internal debate about that because only one has to be on the 40-man roster by the end of this year. And 40-man roster spots are precious when you're a team like the Mets who are competing for championships and have a very deep roster. So I do think somehow, shockingly, I'm backing my way into saying I think Jonah Tong could debut for the Mets this season. But I do not know if it'll be as a full-time starter because he's still working with a bit of an innings limit coming up over the last few years.
So that was where I was going to go with it too. I could think you could see a Jackson Jobe type of situation where he's up at the end of the year as kind of a relief weapon. McLean's interesting because he has that sweeper that is just
is incredible. It's Matt Brash.
He profiles as a guy who could come in and pitch like 2 innings in a playoff game, and I'd be like, okay, I can see that. So, like you said, they have the Mets rotation's outstanding. They have a lot of veteran guys. There aren't exactly openings like
it's regressing dramatically though.
Yeah, but still, I mean, like you have like Dave Peterson pitching well, so like you have tons of guys, tons of experience.
There's bodies.
They can add at the trade deadline too. You got to figure they'll bring in somebody. So there aren't exactly clear paths to a rotation spot, but Tong's the guy where he could come in and make an impact. He jumped, I think I had him 400 in my preseason dynasty rankings for opening day. He's probably going to be in like the top 200 at this point. I have him 70th in the update I'm running right now for just prospects alone. So yeah, huge jump. I mean, that puts him in the like Chase Dolander kind of territory, Hagen Smith, Gage Jump, Cade Horton, that type of range for me. Trey Esevich, like real interesting guys in that range.
Yeah, being someone that covers the Mets for most of my life, and as a fan, watched every single game. I've been close to this Nolan McLean development and Jonah Tong, but Tong has become, I think, even unbiasedly, one of the most exciting pitching prospects in baseball. Like you don't see strikeout rates like this, you don't see explosive fastballs like this come around very often. Whereas McLean is still much closer to me of being a bona fide major league starting pitcher. He's developed a sinker really well. He's developed a cutter really well. He has a sweeper that's going to be one of the best overall breaking balls in Major League Baseball the second he steps on the field. He has a curveball. He works off that to left-handed pitchers. He's grown a lot, and he's only been a full-time pitcher for one full season because he was a two-way player out of Oklahoma State and a DH that could hit the ball upwards of 110 miles an hour. Now he's not even doing that anymore. That's how much potential he has as a pitcher. But he has only been a full-time pitcher. I think this actually is the first full year because I think he gave up hitting last May. Right. So I think that there's probably some reluctance of the Mets to be like, let's just let him get through a full season pitching before he does it in the major leagues. But at the end of the day, if you look at this entire 40-man roster, I don't know how many pitchers on it have more starting potential, even at this given moment, than Nolan McLean. Seeing what this repertoire has become with, again, a great sinker, a fastball gets up 95, 96 miles an hour. He has a complete starting pitcher's arsenal, but I think there's some hesitancy based on where he's been and who he's been and how he's kind of picked up this pitching stuff.
Yeah, Tong's so unique where if the stuff translates and he's able to miss bats at anything close to this rate in the majors, like he's going to be an absolute monster. So he's the type of guy fantasy-wise, like those are the pitching prospects that are interesting to me. It's like, okay, because all pitching prospects are insanely risky. So it's like, why not roll the dice on where if this clicks, he's instantly an ace. Like, let's try that.
And on the other side of that, with pitching prospects being inherently risky, the Mets need to make a deadline move. I have a feeling that if there's a big splash, Jonah Tong is the guy, sadly.
Yeah, could be.
It's good.
Hey, Devers got traded. Like
that's what I'm saying. Anything can happen now. I'm ready to go. I can't wait to cover this team over the next couple months. But speed run, another 5 minutes here for you guys. Frank missed out on Matthew Liberatore, got Michael Soroka versus Colorado and the Dodgers. Also got Ryan Yarbrough versus the Angels. Thoughts? That Soroka two-step is horrifying. I think Jake Irvin has the exact one, but opposite as well with Rockies and Dodgers coming. I mean, but same Rockies and Dodgers. It's I don't, for guys that aren't, I don't trust their consistency. I'm always very afraid of the one great matchup, one bad matchup, because a bad matchup might just wind up being average. If you get 5 innings, 4 runs out of Soroka and no win against the Rockies, and then you're staring at the Dodgers on Sunday, you're not going to be excited about that.
I just wouldn't play either guy. Here's what I'll say for Ryan Yarbrough. It's in Yankee Stadium, and the one thing the Angels do have is right-handed bats who can do damage, like Jorge Soler, Joe Adell, Mike Trout. Like, just don't do it. Like this, there's a scenario where this goes like really poorly, so don't. I just would avoid either guy. This is not worth the risk.
Quick one from Jeddah. Drop Roki in a 12-teamer, 100,000%. Roki was shut down again over the weekend. I don't know when the next time we see Roki Sasaki is, and he also wasn't good when he was pitching. So I'd find it very hard to keep him on a roster of any league size that's not a dynasty league at the moment.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I wrote about him for a Dynasty Stock Watch column a couple weeks ago, and I said like he's one of the players I think is the most difficult, challenging to forecast in the entire landscape because he's that quintessential like generational type of pitching prospect that you're like, okay, this is going to work. But he clearly had some physical issues, and then the Dodgers had spoken about when he signed, like we have to do some work with his arsenal and like
Yes,
go under the hood and try to. So I think that played a big role, not only physically getting him back right again, but also giving him time out of the spotlight to work on things and come back a different pitcher. I think that's going to be impactful and make a difference for him long term. But he's not close to returning the season. I think Dave Roberts was a little more optimistic on Sunday night when he talked about him. So yeah, I'd be encouraged that he's going to come back and pitch at some point, but he's not going to be fantasy relevant right out of the gate. I think just be cautious.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So now a couple other quick ones here. I just lost a question I was going to grab. Where'd it go? It was here. This bass bone right here. Michael Toglia, Gavin Sheets, Dan Myers, Josh Lone, a 5x5 hits instead of average. I'm going low Sheets, Myers, Toglia until Toglia's in Coors Field that he jumps up.
I mean, yeah, what a bad start to the year he had. I was, I was just blurbing when he got demoted. It was like, are these the real numbers? Like a 49% strikeout rate.
Very bad.
It's not what you want, as I think Joe Girardi once famously said. I have the same order.
That's it. Another quick one here from Perry. Thanks for answering all your questions. You're welcome, Perry. For catcher, Kirk Stevenson or Sal Perez. Weirdly, I think Kirk actually. Kirk is hitting the ball so well right now. One of the highest batting averages in baseball since May 1st, and he's now kind of come back into being this like full-time top half of the lineup guy for the Blue Jays team, like he was a few years ago.
This is the part with catchers where the aging curves. It's up, and then the cliff. And Perez might be on the other side of that because every time I think he's kind of coming out of things, he goes into this another prolonged tailspin. So Stevenson was hurt and he's healthy now. He had a good.
He's playing really well.
Yeah, he's been producing, so he's definitely the guy I think if I want to consider somebody besides Kirk.
Yep, and I'll give you one more here for Chad. Chad's been great in the chat all day. Last one for me. Mike Tauchman continues to sort out near the top of the free agent outfit list in NFBC league despite not doing anything special. Is he viable to Lumi trades, or do you avoid the team? In NFBC league, I have talked about him, a TGFBI team. Like he's playing every single day, top of the lineup. It's hard to give up on someone like that in a 15-team league where you're really you're looking for at-bats, plate appearances above all else.
So when I was at Baseball Prospectus, one of my colleagues, Mike Gianella, he used to call it the Freddie Galvis factor. It was like a warm body who's going to play every day. Occasionally hits a home run. He doesn't cause calamity to your ratios. Like that's what you need in those deeper formats. So he's kind of that guy. So he's fine.
Yeah, like I'm not telling them. I'm running around telling people I'm Mike Tauchman, but I'm happy he's my fifth outfielder. But thank you guys all so much for hanging with us. Definitely more of a like podcast style this week instead of Q&A, just because of everything that's been going on in baseball. Some good Red Sox talk, some good Devers talk. But thank you guys so much for being with us. We'll be back same time next week. Appreciate you all. We'll check you next time. That's George. Also, George, tell them where they follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, you can find me at George Bissell. Check out the Dynasty stuff on Rotoworld. And thanks for having me this week. It was awesome to pinch hit. And you do a great job, James. And excited to get Eric back on here next week.
Yeah, thank you again, George, for being here. And again, I'm James Schiano on Twitter. Waiver Wire column on Rotoworld tomorrow. Steals column every single Wednesday on Rotoworld as well. Again, thank you guys so much for being here. Chat was great. Can't wait to talk to you guys again next week. See you later.